Why does communism differ so greatly in theory and practice? Why have communist countries promoting equality been cruel and authoritarian? Why are communist regimes perceived as evil?
Introduction. Communism, as a political and economic ideology, has profoundly shaped the modern world. In theory, it promises a classless society where resources are distributed according to need, fostering equality and eliminating exploitation. However, the practical implementation of communism in countries like the Soviet Union and China has often resulted in authoritarianism, widespread suffering, and the suppression of dissent. This stark contrast between theory and practice raises critical questions. Why does communism diverge so significantly from its theoretical ideals? Why have communist states, despite preaching equality, often been cruel and dictatorial toward their citizens? And why are these regimes frequently labeled as evil? This essay explores these questions through historical analysis, examining the mechanisms behind these discrepancies and their implications.
Theoretical foundations of communism. Communist theory, primarily developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, envisions a utopian society based on the following principles. Abolition of private property. The means of production are collectively owned, eliminating class distinctions. Classless society. Wealth and power redistribution eradicates social hierarchies. Distribution according to need. Individuals contribute based on ability and receive resources as needed. Dictatorship of the proletariat. A transitional phase where the working class holds political power to suppress the bourgeoisie and establish socialism. These principles aim to create an equitable society free from exploitation. However, Marx also noted that transitioning from capitalism to communism would require a revolution, which could sow the seeds for authoritarian tendencies in practice. The Soviet Union. From idealism to repression. The Soviet Union, the first state to implement communist principles, exemplifies the gap between theory and practice. Centralized power. Following the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, Vladimir Lenin's Communist Party consolidated power through secret police and terror to suppress opposition. The Library of Congress notes that the party maintained control through strict surveillance and repression.
Stalin's reign. Joseph Stalin's leadership marked the height of totalitarianism. His policies, including forced collectivization, purges, and the Gulag system, resulted in millions of deaths and widespread oppression. History Skills lists Stalin among the most brutal modern dictators. Suppression of dissent. The Communist Party used agencies like the Cheka and later the KGB to eliminate opposition, imprisoning or executing political rivals, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens without trial. CES at UNC highlights the persistent oppressiveness of the system, even after Stalin's death.
Economic failures. While the Soviet command economy achieved initial industrialization, it led to inefficiencies, shortages, and stagnation over time. Britannica attributes the Soviet collapse partly to economic mismanagement. These factors demonstrate how the Soviet Union's pursuit of communist ideals devolved into authoritarianism and cruelty, far from the promised equality. China. The Great Leap Forward and Cultural Revolution. In China, Mao Zedong's Communist Party also diverged significantly from theoretical ideals, particularly during the Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 1962, and the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976. Great Leap Forward. This campaign aimed to rapidly transform China into an industrial powerhouse by mobilizing farmers into communes. Unrealistic production targets, forced labor, and property confiscation led to catastrophic consequences. Britannica estimates 20 to 30 million deaths from famine, while the Association for Asian Studies calls it one of history's worst famines, largely preventable.
Cultural Revolution. Mao launched this movement to purge capitalist and traditional elements, consolidating his authority. Red Guards persecuted intellectuals, dissidents, and alleged counter-revolutionaries, causing millions of deaths, imprisonments, or re-education assignments. Britannica describes it as a period of profound social, political, and economic turmoil that nearly destroyed the Communist Party. Authoritarian control. Both periods reflect Mao's centralized power, sidelining collective decision-making. Stanford FSI notes Mao's rejection of moderate economic policies as a driver of these extreme measures. These events highlight China's implementation of communism as marked by cruelty and authoritarianism, contradicting the vision of an egalitarian society. Reasons for the discrepancy. The divergence between communist theory and practice can be attributed to several factors. Revolutionary necessity. Establishing and maintaining communist states often required suppressing opposition, leading to authoritarian measures like secret police, purges, and censorship, which contradicted democratic ideals. Ideological rigidity. Strict adherence to Marxist-Leninist doctrine often justified oppressive actions, with leaders like Stalin and Mao framing dissent as a threat to the revolution. Wikipedia notes the Chinese Communist Party's emphasis on people's democratic dictatorship, rejecting Western democratic models. Cult of personality. Leaders like Stalin and Mao cultivated personal worship, centralizing power and stifling opposition, fostering dictatorship. The strategist highlights how party leaders relied on control to survive. Economic failures. Communist economic systems, such as Soviet collectivization and China's Great Leap Forward, often led to famine and hardship, necessitating harsher controls to maintain stability. Investopedia details the Great Leap's devastating impact. Lack of democratic institutions. Communist states typically lacked mechanisms for checks and balances, such as independent judiciaries, free media, or multi-party systems, allowing leaders unchecked power and enabling authoritarianism. Why equality led to cruelty and dictatorship. Despite promoting equality, communist states frequently resorted to secret police and terror to suppress dissent and maintain power. The Soviet Gulag system and China's Cultural Revolution caused millions of deaths and immense suffering. Wikipedia notes Stalin's use of secret police and labor camps, with over 1.05 million deaths. This likely stemmed from post-revolutionary power struggles and fear of dissent, undermining the realization of democracy and freedom. Why perceived as evil regimes? Communist regimes are often labeled evil due to their records of mass repression, human rights abuses, and economic failures, such as the Soviet purges and China's Great Leap famine. However, this perception is debated, varying by cultural and political perspectives. The U.S. Department of State views the Chinese Communist Party as a threat to global peace, while IE Insights argues that labeling China as communist may be misleading given its market reforms. Evidence suggests these regimes failed to deliver on equality, often exacerbating social injustices. Conclusion. The significant gap between communist theory and practice arises from the challenges of implementing idealistic systems in complex realities. Despite promises of equality and freedom from exploitation, historical communist states like the Soviet Union and China became cruel and authoritarian due to centralized power, ideological rigidity, and economic failures. Understanding this discrepancy is crucial for critically assessing the legacy of communist regimes and their ongoing relevance in the modern world.